Hi guys, today we're going to be talking about editing your elements of art photos in black and white using the Lightroom mobile app. So I have the app open now, and I've already uploaded my chosen pictures for the project. I've got a few extras in here because there's some that I'm not sure between, but ultimately I will be editing a total of 25 pictures in black and white. That's the same thing you will be doing. So that's the goal of the project. You should have 25 pictures and you will edit 25 pictures in black and white. So to get my pictures in here, you can see when I move around on the screen at the bottom here, there's this blue button. So I'll click that on the left side and I can add my photos from my camera roll. Once I've done that, I've selected the pictures that I wanted to import and they're now here inside Lightroom. So you can pause the video and go ahead and do that. Once I've got my pictures imported, next I'm going to start deciding which ones I feel like editing. This is the fun part. So I'm looking through and I'm thinking about my elements of art. I've got line, shape, value, texture, space, and form. So I think that I'm going to start with this picture first. I'm going a little out of order, but for texture. So first things first, I want to make my picture black and white. To do this, we are actually going to deal with something called saturation. So saturation is the degree of purity of a color. So basically how much color there is. So when we desaturate a photo, that means removing all the color. So that's what I'm going to be doing here. At the bottom, you can see all of the buttons. I know you can't see where I'm clicking, so I'm just going to be describing that for you. At the bottom, I'm clicking on color, and then there is a black and white button, but I don't want you to use that because when you do that, the app is choosing certain tonal values for you, and I want you to have full control over your picture. So rather than pressing that black and white button, we're going to scroll down in the color selection and just slide the saturation slider all the way down to -100. So you can see this removes all of the color from my picture without messing with any of the values. Next, I'm going to be, again, dealing with the values. So I'm going to switch to the button to the left of color, which is called light. And when I scroll, you can see there's quite a few different sliders. So I'm going to talk about the sliders first, and then I will be talking about the curve, which you see here in the top right corner. So first, exposure. That is basically the overall lightness of your picture. So when I slide this up, you can see my picture gets lighter overall. I'm not going to be using that on this specific picture because I feel like it's pretty well lit. I'm trying to get it back to 0. There is an undo button at the top. So if I did this, that's the nice thing about Lightroom is it's all slider based. If I make an adjustment and I don't like it, at the top, do you see this little arrow that's kind of hooking left? That's the undo button. So once I press that, it takes me back one step. Next, you'll see there's a slider called contrast. And so what that does is it kind of makes things pop. You can think of it that way. It makes the shadows darker and the highlights brighter. So the lightest lights and the darkest darks kind of stand out more. I'm going to drag it up pretty high so you can see what it looks like. And then I'm going to hit the undo button so you can see this is like the after, this is the before. So you can see the difference that that is making. I personally like to add a little bit of contrast to my pictures because I like things to stand out. Next, we have the highlights. So that's what we call the lightest lights. Again, I'm going to drag it up so you can see, and then I'm going to hit the undo so you can see it off. Highlights is something, pay attention to this tassel on the right. This is a picture, by the way, from the Scottish store in Williamsburg. These were like some bags that had different animal hair on them, so I liked the texture there. I thought that was pretty cool. So watch the little tassel on the right. When I drag the highlight slider up, if I go too much with it, you'll see that I start to lose the detail in that tassel. So I want to be very careful with that. Something more around here would be much more appropriate because I can still see those details, and I'm zooming in right now, I'm pinching to zoom in this tassel, as opposed to this, that's too much. So I can zoom back out, pinching to zoom. Next, I'll show you the shadows. So as you can guess, this adjusts the shadows in your picture. Dragging it to the right is lightening the shadows. So you can see in the bottom right corner, where if I drag it to the left, that's going to make shadows darker. So you can play with that depending on the image. Again, this is something I would be careful with going too far, because if you look at the part on the left here, if I take that too far, I stop having detail in the hair here. So I don't want to go too far with that. Then I've got a white and a black slider. So as you can imagine, that adjusts the white values in the image. Again, pretty much general rule is you don't want to go all the way to 100 on any of this. That's way too contrasty. We want to see the details here. And basically what I'm teaching you here is a nice overall black and white edit. And there will be times where you can do dramatic, wild edits, but I want to see that you can show a full range of value in your images. So I want to pull the shadows back just a little bit. The other cool thing with Lightroom Mobile is if I tap my picture, I can see before and after. So I can see what I've done to the values. I know it's a little bit hard to see because it's going from color to black and white, but that's there if you'd like to look at that. Next thing I want to show you is in effects. So the third one over. We've got a few more sliders here. I'm not going to focus on all of these because there are quite a few, but clarity is one that you might like to play with. Clarity and contrast kind of go together because, like I told you before, contrast makes the shadows darker and the highlights brighter. Again, I showed you the before and after. Clarity is kind of similar, but it sort of increases the contrast in your midtones. So some people like this if they like more of like a gritty look. It's kind of edgy. It really makes the details stand out. I'll drag it up a bit. Watch the tassel again. That's really seeming to be the best part. And if I do undo, you can see what it was before. So this might be nice if you're looking to add a little bit of definition to your image. So that's like a good basic edit here. The other thing I wanted to show you, which is how you can get a little bit more control over the values in your image, is this top right corner here under light, we have curve. So if I click on that little swooping line, this is something called the tone curve. And this is something we'll get into more detail with as we move through the year. But basically this is slider based as well. So in the bottom left corner, that is the darkest darks in value. The top right corner where you see the dot is the lightest lights, which are called the highlights. And the way this works, if you touch anywhere on this line, if you drag the line up, that part will get lighter. If you drag the line down, that part will get darker. So I'm looking at my picture, and for me, I would like to slightly adjust the midtones. So I'm going to click the middle of my tone curve and drag it up just slightly. So if you look at my picture, I'm going to hit undo so you can see before. So midtones, I'm pulling it up to get lighter. If I pulled it down, those would get darker. I'm going to undo again. The highlights is the top right once again. So again, being careful with the highlights, but if I drag it up just a little bit, you can see overall those lighter values get lighter. Undo. Darker on the bottom left corner is the shadows or the dark values. So if I click there, drag it down, that's going to make my picture overall darker. Once again, I'm hitting undo. So for me, I'm feeling like I have a decent range of value, but I would like to adjust the midtones just a little bit. And this is something you want to be very careful with. The good thing is we have the undo button, but if you go too far with any of this, it's going to quickly get out of control, like you just saw. So I want to very gently adjust my tone curve. And even that one I feel like was too much. So I'm going to hit done here, and I'm going back out. You can see I'm trying lots of different techniques to make subtle changes to my overall image. I would like to bring the shadows a little bit lighter because I feel like it's a little dark. But before I decide that my picture's done, I'm looking at it. Do I see the lightest lights? Do I see pure white somewhere? Do I see the darkest darks? Do I see pure dark somewhere? And now I'm trying to imagine the value scale. So fading from darkest dark to lightest light. Do I see a variety of gray in my image? If the answer to all of those is yes, and you think your picture looks good, then you're probably done. So I'm done with this first edit. I'm going to press this upward arrow with the square, and I'm going to export to camera roll. I would suggest going out and going and checking your camera roll and making sure that it's saved. But the nice thing is when I press this back arrow in the top left corner next to edit, I can go out and I can now see the edited version of my picture. So I'm going to show you guys another edit, and then I'll do a quick one after that. So this is a problem that some people might have. To me, this picture is a little bit too dark. So my first reaction, well, we're going to edit in black and white. So I'm going to do that first. I'm going to saturation, dragging it down to -100. Next, I'm going to light. So again, overall, this picture is too dark. I was shooting with my real camera, and so I had my settings just slightly underexposed. I stepped from an area where I was in a lot of light into an area that was quite dark, so that's how this happened. I also, when you're editing, I would recommend that you have your screen brightness up so that you get an accurate representation of your edit. You can see, I don't know if you could tell, but I just lightened up my screen a little bit, and I can see my picture a lot better. I know some people like to keep their screen turned down, but when you're editing, you should always turn it up. So now that I've done that, I'm looking at my picture and I can see the values much better. So I'm going to start playing through the steps. I'm going to talk you through what I'm doing. So I'm looking at contrast. Once again, that makes the shadows darker and the highlights brighter. I can look at my highlights slider. For me, I'm going to zoom in at this flower. I could adjust the highlights just a little bit, but because I want to see this detail in the flower petals, I'm going to be very careful with that because I don't want to lose that detail. So I just did a tiny bit on the highlights to make those whites really pop. This picture has a lot of shadow, so I'm probably not going to add any shadow to it. I don't really feel that it needs it. Maybe I want to make the whites pop just a little bit more. Once again, I'm paying attention to those petals. And for me, I think this is pretty close. I do want to go to effects and bump up the clarity just a little bit because you can see before and after. This is the after, that's the before. I feel like it brings out that graininess in the petal just a little bit. You can see some of those I don't know, definition. And also I feel like doing that made me really notice these like hairs or spikes on these leaves. I don't know what it'd be called, but anyway, you know what I mean. So there's that. And that's basically my edit for this picture. I can see the lightest lights, I can see the darkest darks, and I can see the values in between. That was pretty quick for me. You're probably going to work quite a bit slower like I did in that first picture. I really want you to try working with the sliders. Take your time. But for this one, I'm done. I'm exporting to camera roll, and that's successful. So now I'm going back. I'll show you another picture. I forgot to mention too for that one, what element of art do you think this one's showing? I really liked that picture, but off the top of my head, I don't really know what value I was going for. Maybe value? But again, I don't think it's the best representation, so maybe that's not one of my top picks. I am still editing 25 pictures, but I'm looking for the elements of art. I'm really paying attention. This one I like a lot for value, but I also really like it for line. This one, I think I was thinking about texture. Same thing here, texture. This one, I was thinking about space. So for this one, I want to go ahead and show you now in this portion of the video a few techniques that you may need. So we were driving on the parkway and I was shooting through the front windshield. This one, I have part of the dashboard in the picture, which I don't particularly care for. So I could adjust the crop of my image. That might help me out. Sorry, I was looking at something else real quick. If I hit the crop tool, I want to drag from the corner and be very careful. I want to keep it in proportion. So now, right there, and I hit check. So now that gave me more of a crop. For this picture, I was thinking about space. So I was thinking the Jeep is the positive space and everything around it's the negative space. I'm going to slightly touch on the exposure to overall lighten the picture. Not too much, because I can do those details myself throughout. The highlights, I'm watching carefully on the road right here. I'm trying to zoom so you can see. If I pull the highlights up too much, I'm going to lose those details on the parkway. So I pulled highlights just a little bit to make the trees pop a bit more. I don't feel that this one needs a lot of shadow, but let's test it out and see what it looks like. That's the name of the game here. Try and see what you think. I actually do like adding a tiny bit into this region here. I feel like that makes that stand out more. Next, I'm looking at the whites once again, sliding that up just a tiny bit, and the black value down just a little bit. All right, I am going to go to, maybe I'll mess with my tone curve a little bit. So I could pull on the left side, once again, pulling it down. You can see, especially in those trees on the left, I will undo. That really adjusted those darker values there. I can pull my middle, which is the midtones, up just a little bit. And yeah, I feel like that has made the Jeep stand out. Sorry, I didn't mean to go back. The Jeep stand out a lot more. Maybe I want to bump up the clarity just a tiny bit. I'm into that right now. Seeing the details throughout. And yeah, I feel like that one's pretty good. I can see the darkest darks, lightest lights, everything in between. I cropped to get rid of an area that I didn't need, and I'm going to go ahead and export to camera roll. Going back, looking for what do I want next. So I'm also going to keep track of my elements kind of mentally. I've got some space there. I'm thinking I like this one for line, because I can see the line on the roof, the line on the pole, lots of lines going on. Let's go with this one, because I have another technique that I want to show you that some of you might need. So this, again, like I said, this later portion of the video is kind of showing more, ooh, I didn't mean to hit that, more specific edits that you may need. So I just desaturated that, and I can already see some things that I want to mess with. What is going on with this picture? Oh, I accidentally hit the auto button. I was like, why does this already have adjustments? So I just hit undo. I was wondering what was going on. And I'm going back to color and light. Okay, that's way better. I was so confused. There's an auto button right here to the left. Just watch out for that. I accidentally hit it with my thumb. You want to have full control over the edit. I'm messing with the shadow just a little bit, because if you notice, this part I feel is like a tiny bit dark. It's in shadow, but maybe I want to add some light to that area. So, and again, in this specific picture, I kind of like the shadow, but maybe you have a picture where there's a portion of the image that you would like to make what we call a selective edit to. So that's what I'm going to show you in this part. So I could pull the shadows up to try to lighten up under that roof, but the problem is that affects the overall image, where I don't want to get this part too light, because then I won't see the details in the brick. So I've shown you a few times now, like I would do some contrast, I would do a little bit of highlight, a little bit of shadows, some white, and so et cetera, for my regular edit. Clarity, I feel like you guys are probably getting the point of that now. But what I wanted to show you, like I said, is what we call a selective edit. So if there's a portion of your image that you would like to make a specific adjustment to without affecting the whole thing, you can hit in the bottom left corner, selective. And in the top left corner, there's a plus sign. These little things pop up, which they don't describe, but I'm going to tell you what they are. The first one is a brush. So imagine just painting with your finger certain parts of the image that you would like to add your adjustment to. The next one is what they call a radial filter. So that's the circle. I'll just show you. Okay. I just hit a dot and I can make it bigger. So this red area is where that edit would take place. I can get rid of it by hitting back. Like I was saying, the first one, the brush. So, and the cool thing with this is it gives you explanation right there. So I can make the adjustments to my brush here on the left side. But like I said, I can specifically brush certain parts. I'm just showing you. I wouldn't really do this to this picture, but you can see. And then at the bottom, I can specifically adjust that part of my picture. So that's pretty cool, right? Be careful with this. Oops, I didn't mean to undo my clarity. All right, so going back to selective edit, what I was thinking about is, again, perhaps there's a region of your picture that you're hoping to adjust. A lot of times this happens with the sky, or like under here, maybe I want that area just itself to be lighter. I added this gradient, like a graduated filter, and now I can go and adjust just that area. So you see now it's not changing the chimney, I'm just adjusting that part. So maybe there's an image of yours that, like I said, there's a certain part that you just want to edit without messing up other parts of your picture if they're a little more delicate. So that could be very helpful for you. So I would go back, I'm done with selective edits, I just hit the X there, and I'm looking overall at this picture. Honestly, I think I'm pretty close. Maybe I want to play with the black just a little bit to make that stand out. I did clarity a little bit. I already pulled the contrast up. I'm really also paying attention to the sky. I still want to see those really subtle clouds. And yeah, I can see a good variety of line here. So I'm going to go ahead and export to camera roll. So I've shown you so far, of course, the basic edit, kind of walked you through that. I talked about how we're using the saturation slider. Let's talk through while I edit this one. Just want to see how this works, how this goes. So removing the color from the image using the saturation slider, not the black and white button. Now look how different this picture is. This one was kind of fun because it was all the different colored tartans, but now I need to edit in black and white to make this more interesting, to adjust so that was pretty helpful. Adjust so that the values are and the lines are engaging in this picture. So I kind of played with a few sliders just there. I showed you the crop tool. So I wouldn't crop this picture because I cropped it in camera, but I can drag from the corner if I want to get rid of part of my picture. I can also turn. Like for me, I'm someone that I like my pictures to be straight. So I could slightly turn if I felt that this was off. What I'm doing is I just clicked outside the box and I'm just sliding it. So that's very helpful. You can see there's a little bit more at the bottom. If for some reason your picture is turned and you needed to rotate it, you could do that there. And all of this stuff, I'm using that undo button at the top. So I don't want you to be afraid to try different sliders, see what they do, see what kind of effects you're making on the picture. You can always hit undo. I could try my tone curve a little bit. Ugh, that made that a little too strong. If I'm not sure, again, I can undo and I can go back out. Maybe I decide the tone curve's not working for me on this picture. I don't know. I'm going to try again because I don't like to give up. So I feel like that adds a little bit more depth in some of those darker values. But some of these middle tones right here on this third tie, that was kind of making it hard to see. So I'm hitting done. And if I feel like I'm good with this picture, play with the exposure a little bit, I would go ahead and export it to my camera roll. So like I said, I've showed you removing the saturation, the color from an image. I showed you lots of different adjustments in the value of your picture, so lights and darks. I showed you some other techniques like clarity, like to add some great grittiness, like fine textures to your image. I showed you how to crop and how to rotate. I showed you some selective edits, so to adjust a certain part of your picture. And yeah, I hope this helped. You're going to be editing a total of 25 pictures. Remember, you need to have a favorite for each element. Like this one I like for form. So I would sit here and I would go through and I would edit my next picture. I'm paying attention in every single picture to having a good range of value, the lightest lights, the darkest darks, and everything in between, and not just in my value picture. So I want to make sure that I have a good example for each of the elements, because finishing up the project, we'll talk about that later on. I don't want to overload you, but we will be doing a display where you have a favorite picture for each of those elements. So you need to make sure that you have a picture that you like for line, a picture that you like for shape, picture for value, texture, space, and form. So as you're editing, just keep that in mind. Remember, I told you before there was that flower picture. I wasn't really sure what I was going to use that for, but I went ahead and edited it because I need to edit 25 pictures, and I liked it. Sometimes when I'm editing, I'm not quite sure what element I'm going to be using it for. This one I'm thinking form because I can tell that these are 3D. And then when I'm done with the edit, maybe I have a stronger decision, or maybe it just ends up being one of my 25 edits. And then when I've got all of my black and white pictures done, I can look through and say, this one is the best one for line. This one is the best one for shape, etc., etc. Okay, I feel like this video is already pretty long. Like I said, edit your 25 pictures. You've got some time to do that. I will explain the timeline in class. Otherwise, please reach out if you have any questions and have fun editing. Take your time, and I hope that you enjoy the process.